Clarity on Fire, a podcast for people who know what they don't want out of their life and career, but aren't sure what they'd rather be doing.
In a world where it's easy to exist, but hard to feel alive, we, Kristen
and Rachel,
two certified life and career coaches, are here to help you cut through the information overload, get unstuck, and focus not just on how you can have a career you're passionate about, but how to create a whole life that feels fulfilling.
So join us here, where we serve up inspiration and down-to-earth wisdom in a way that only two best friends can.
We want you to experience the relief of knowing that, yes, you're allowed to want more out of your life and career.
And no, you don't have to wander through the dark anymore. Our job is to light the fire that shows you the way. Let's go. Hello.
Hello. One of our favorite things.
Book club. Well,
this book is quite different from some of our more recent book club episodes.
I specifically chose it for that reason. I was like, I do not want to read another intense book. And this proved to be the case. It's about rest.
Our last two were almost like textbook level, just in-depth,
very dense,
either very interactive or just really long and dense content.
Yeah.
This is not. This one is about rest, and it's short, and it's about doing.
And you don't even have to read most of it. You could actually just do the practices. And so we're going to get into it. The whole book is Radiant Rest by Tracee Stanley. The subtitle is Yoga Nidra for Deep Relaxation and Awakened Clarity. I'm like, I like all of those things.
Yeah, I mean, we did build a whole business about clarity.
I know.
So it just feels apropos.
Okay. So what the heck is Yoga Nidra? And why do we do it? So it's the yoga of sleep. And when I first heard about it, I was like, I don't know what that is, but sign me up. Because
how many years ago, I know you know this, how many years ago was it that you and I did a Yoga Nidra class at the gym?
We did.
You don't remember this? I remember something.
Kristen, that wasn't me. That was Stacy.
You didn't come?
I wasn't there.
Why didn't you come?
I don't know, but Stacy also mistook me for being there. And I was like, that was Kristen.
Yeah, we both thought you were there. Okay, well,
you guys are forgettable, but I'm not. That's the bottom line on that. You guys are forgetting each other, but I was there, apparently. I was not. I never did it. I was jealous. I don't know why I couldn't come, but I couldn't
why you didn't do that. Yeah. So that was really cool to do it the correct way with an instructor, with all the props. I was doing it at home, doing some of the exercises in this book, but I didn't. And I sort of had an instructor because one of the features of this book is Tracee Stanley has recorded a lot of the practices that she offers in the book as audios, and you can go download them. The link is in the book, and have her talk you through it. So you sort of have a guide, but it was just cool to do it in person.
Well, sorry, that wasn't me.
I would have sworn that you were there. I probably just because I assume you were there because that's the kind of thing that you would have totally come along for.
I don't know why I didn't come. I'm sure I had a conflict
going on.
Anyway, but when I first heard about the existence of it, I was intrigued because yoga where you're allowed to like rest, and that's the whole point, sounded like indulgent in the best way.
Yoga Nidra is essentially a really extended version of that Shavasana pose at the very end of yoga that usually lasts a minute, 2 minutes, maybe up to 3 or 4 minutes.
It's like 30 minutes of that.
It's the best.
Okay, so diving into this book, the very first thing you see before you even get to the table of contents is this quote. Now is the time for you to learn how to sleep and awaken to your power. I was sold when I read that.
Because raising my hand, please give me that.
I'm like, the fact that these two things, sleeping and awakening to your power, are hand in hand. Like, this is how you get to that. I was like,
yep.
Teach me the mysteries of this book.
Oh, I know. I want to just read the very first paragraph of the introduction and give you a little bit of a sense of like what we're talking about here. So Yoga Nidra has been called many things. In Sanskrit, the word Nidra translates as sleep, and Yoga Nidra has become widely known as the yoga of sleep. It is also described as conscious sleep, the sleep of the yogis, transcendent, cosmic, and divine, all of which are true. Yet no matter how we try to capture the essence of Yoga Nidra, no words can truly transmit the magic and mystery of the practice. If you have ever floated in a sea of stars or felt that you have peered through a wormhole into another dimension during Yoga Nidra, you know what I mean. I mean, if you haven't done Yoga Nidra and you want to peer through a wormhole of another dimension or float in the sea of stars, like, let's do this thing.
I mean, obviously I was like, yep, keep talking to me. I would like to peep through some wormholes in this lifetime. Okay. So that sounds very attractive. And
it's like sleep on steroids. It's basically like, let's infuse your sleep type state with like extra consciousness. And we're going to talk more about kind of the science of how it works in a little bit, but just know it's like supercharged sleep.
I mean, obviously we don't really need to talk about the fact that sleep is critical to like every part of being a human, mental health, immune function, healing and preventing illnesses, like acute ones, chronic ones. Sleep helps us form long-term memories. Like no one's going to argue that sleep is vital, but one of the things she said in this book was that studies have shown that most of us are sleeping an average of 1 to 2 hours less than we did 60 years ago. And it's worse for poor people, marginalized people, single moms, which obviously, and that freaking sucks, but literally all of us are not getting as much sleep as we were even like when our grandparents were youthful.
That's so upsetting to me. I love sleeping so much. Like, why did life has just got so busy that was the thing we decided to sacrifice.
Yeah. Well, sleep. So that's one of the reasons why we need something like Yoga Nidra, because the point is that we're actually getting into a deep sleep state while we're still conscious, which is amazing. But sleep is critical, but Yoga Nidra is more than just taking a nap, because like if you could just make up for the loss of sleep with a 30-minute nap versus 30-minute Yoga Nidra, I feel like Tracee Stanley would say do Yoga Nidra, don't take a nap, because there's more to Yoga Nidra than just like mimicking the deep sleep state.
Yeah. And we're going to get into some of what that is, but essentially it's intentional sleep. It's not just taking a normal nap. It's kind of like moving yourself into that deep state more intentionally, more quickly, and being able to emerge out of it. I have to say, my few experiences of doing Yoga Nidra, you can do it for 30 minutes and feel like you took a 3-hour nap.
That's kind of the point. Mm-hmm. The word Nidra has another meaning besides sleep. Ni means void, and Dru means to draw forth or reveal. So we are drawing forth and revealing things out of the void while we do Yoga Nidra. Okay, I want to read a quote to you. Sorry, I got my book. We both got our books.
You might hear some page flipping.
You're going to hear some page flipping at times. Okay. The Indian English poet, philosopher, and yogi Sri Aurobindo described the void in his book, The Life Divine. A silence, an entry into a wide or even immense or infinite emptiness is part of the inner spiritual experience. This silence is the silence of the spirit, which is the condition of a greater knowledge, power, and bliss. And this emptiness is the emptying of the cup of our natural being, a liberation of it from its turbid content so that it may be filled with the wine of God. It is the passage not into non-existence, but to a greater existence.
Oh,
I know.
I mean, how is this not the best infomercial for trying Yoga Nidra?
I mean, that's
the way she talks about it. You're just like, give me some of that, please. Okay, here's another good quote that's, it's actually under this section, the subsection of waking up, which I think is really interesting when we're talking about
mimicking sleep.
The state of yoga nidra is not something you can force or demand. The beauty is that during preparation, the techniques that I'll be sharing, you get to rest deeply and learn about true surrender by expanding your capacity to be held and supported. You may glimpse where and why you are stuck in repeating patterns. You become more peaceful and intuitive. You can amplify your clarity, creativity, self-knowledge, and feel empowered to claim your birthright to experience deep rest. You may allow yourself to fall asleep to all that is not real and lasting, such as the desire for fame and material wealth. You may wake up to the eternal and radiant part of yourself that is always watching, the part of you that knows and never sleeps. By practicing the sleep of the yoginis, you can radically awaken to the magic and knowledge that the universe holds while most of us is sleeping. This type of wakefulness is more important than ever if we truly want to be part of a change that creates a more beautiful and just world for everyone. You think about it, if
you can do all that while lying on your back, y'all.
Yeah, if you're just busy running from thing to thing to thing, you're not really fully awake. There's a numbing that comes from busyness. And so this intentional slowing down and tapping into your subconscious while still remaining somewhat conscious is such a powerful way of waking up while also feeling like you're just chilling and sleeping at the same time. It's the best of all worlds, guys.
I feel like this little bit really sums it up. The technique of yoga nidra is a journey through the states of consciousness while remaining awake and aware. As we are guided through the practice, we are led closer and closer to the state of deep sleep and beyond, to our true self or samadhi. That's actually a very big theme throughout this book, is yoga nidra gets you to your samadhi or your true self. But we also stay aware. We do not fall asleep to the beauty of our true nature. We are aware, and we are aware of awareness. Once again, all right, I'm still on board.
Not a lot of convincing required in this
But that's
book.
what it is. So that's what it is. And that's why we do it. Mm-hmm. Because we tired. And we're working too much. And we're chronically sleep deprived. And we are not connected to our true selves. And yoga nidra helps restore your mind, body, spirit. We're going to get into more of how that actually works in this next section, where we kind of go through how it works, both the scientific and sort of the more spiritual approach to how it works.
I feel like we could not have chosen this book, and she could not have released this book at a better time.
This is a brand new book. She only released it like maybe a month ago or 6 weeks ago or something.
And there's even references to COVID in this book. Yeah. So she was working on it
during COVID,
in the midst of all this. And like, what a time after the year plus that we've all been through. Yeah. That's been exhausting.
Yeah.
This is so needed right now. So I'm really glad that she took this time and got this out to the world right now. Just couldn't be timelier.
Okay. So ever since the EEG, the electroencephalogram was invented in the 1920s, scientists have been studying what happens in our brains and our bodies when we sleep, also when we meditate. What's very cool is that the brainwave patterns you can see on an EEG actually overlay the stages of consciousness that are described in ancient texts by like kind of the inventors of yoga nidra. The earliest known practitioners of yoga nidra already kind of knew about the stages of sleep that were only charted once the EEG was invented 100 years ago.
Isn't that amazing?
So I'm like, infinite wisdom, y'all. When you plug into something, you get downloads. And so much
before science can even back you up.
So much of what science is discovering now is shit that like we have been knowing about for thousands of years. So what came first? Remember what came first. You know what I mean?
Okay. So there's a really interesting story that she shares that I want to just
about the about like the EEG and tracking brain waves.
And I just want to read it directly from the book.
It's very cool.
Just as scientific researchers have studied the physical impact of mindfulness meditation, they have also studied the impact of deep meditative states, including yoga nidra. Some of the first research in this area was conducted in the summer of 1970 by Elmer Green, PhD, a scientist at the Menninger Institute of Topeka, Kansas, who believed that the mind could play a big part in preventing and curing disease. His research explored whether people can learn to voluntarily control psychologic functions that are normally involuntary.
Physiologic functions.
Correct. Yep.
Physiology, not psychology.
Yes. Such as someone having no measurable pain or bleeding while the skin is pierced by a thick needle. Dr. Green and his wife and colleague, Alice Green, had heard about a few people who claimed to have extraordinary powers in psychophysiological self-regulation, and they wanted to study these individuals to see what was really happening. Swami Rama, for one, claimed that he could stop his heart and regulate his blood pressure. Dr. Green invited the Swami to participate in the series of experiments that Green hoped would give understanding of the capacity of the human mind.
The Greens hooked the Swami up to various electromagnetic machines to measure his voluntary control of internal states. The success of these experiments would lie in the Swami's ability not only to turn off internal states, but also to turn them back on. Over the course of 2 summers, Swami Rama succeeded at demonstrating his ability to control blood flow in his hand, stop his heart for 10 seconds, move a needle by chanting a mantra, aka telekinesis, and produce theta brainwaves as measured by EEG that he called stilling the conscious and bringing forward the unconscious. By intentionally creating specific brainwave patterns, Swami Rama put himself into various states of consciousness, training his body to respond to commands and regulate body functions over which we normally have no control, which is usually called autogenic programming. And using visualization to tell his body what to do, he achieved a state of conscious relaxation. Dr. Green recounts in his writing, Biofeedback in Yoga, he called this state yogic sleep and said it was better than normal sleep. Swami Rama could enter this state at will, producing an EEG record much like deepest sleep with 40% delta waves. These demonstrations led them to the banks of the Ganges River in India to study other yogis who had similar powers and inform the development of clinical biofeedback, which the Greens originated and to which they devoted their lives.
That is insane.
Yeah.
This man could stop his heart and move needles with his brain.
I mean, yeah, your brain is waves, right? Like your whole body is just a system of electricity, basically. Mm-hmm. Your heart has a magnetic field. Yeah, if you can get that good at controlling your own frequencies, and your frequencies are affecting everything around you too, in and outside of you. So this doesn't actually scientifically boggle the mind. It just seems like it should be impossible.
The human mind, because we just walk around all day
thinking we have no power.
Exactly.
And you could be like this dude, completely stopping his heart for 10 seconds at will.
Mean, that is wild.
Yeah.
I feel like Hogwarts is real, you guys. We can move things with our minds.
Yeah. However, I do think he probably had to work at that nonstop. Like that was a full-time job to master your body in that way.
I don't know that an hour of meditation once a week is gonna get you there.
No, necessarily. He's probably doing hours and hours of this every day for years.
Master looks like, but still, it's possible, which is wild, absolutely wild. So, we're gonna give a quick. We're gonna read directly from the book to give you a quick refresher on the different types of brainwaves, because I think that helps to understand what we're moving through as you're doing Yoga Nidra. You're moving through these deeper brainwaves that happen typically during sleep.
And then we'll also talk about the stages of sleep, because I needed a reminder on all of these things.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we're going to move through the brainwaves, starting at the fastest brainwaves and moving down to the slowest.
The five widely recognized brainwaves.
Correct. The fastest is gamma waves. Science is still learning about gamma waves, but we know that they are the fastest measurable brainwaves and occur during peak events or moments of heightened perception, such as out-of-body experiences. Gamma activity is involved in attention, working memory, and long-term memory processes, and in psychiatric disorders such as schizophrenia, hallucination, Alzheimer's disease, and epilepsy. These brainwaves had not yet been discovered at the time of the Greens' experiment with the yogis.
Funny how... That's not even that long ago. We didn't even know about gamma waves. Beta. With beta brainwaves, our awareness is external, concerned with the outside world. We are alert, attentive, and engaged. We experience 3 types of beta waves. Low beta, which is maybe while you're reading a book. Beta, that's you're attending a lecture or trying to solve a problem. And high beta, which is a state of high anxiety or excitement.
Okay, moving into alpha waves. Alpha waves happen when our eyes are closed and our attention is directed internally, such as during yoga, meditation, and mindful presence. This is where we first begin to draw the 5 senses inward, known in yogic philosophy as pratyahara, withdrawal of the senses.
Then there's theta. Theta waves are our gateway to learning, memory, and intuition. The theta state exists during deep relaxation, deep meditation, daydreaming, and dreaming during sleep.
Okay, then we're down into delta waves. Delta waves indicate that external awareness has been suspended and are seen in someone who is in a dreamless state of sleep during a drug-induced coma or under general anesthesia. Delta waves allow for healing and rejuvenation. They are necessary for good sleep that rejuvenates the body, revitalizes the brain, and strengthens the immune system. These were the brainwaves that Swami Rama produced at will. Wild. Dean Rodin, PhD of the Institute of Noetic Sciences in Petaluma, California, told me that during experiments decades later, Swami Vida Bharati also produced delta waves while fully conscious. Rodin was having a casual conversation with Swami Vida while the Swami was being hooked up to an EEG monitor. And as they continued to talk, the technician alerted them that Swami Vida was already in delta state. This was a surprise to both men and perhaps was an indication of Swami Vida's mastery of the state of yoga nidra. He was just like having a conversation and his brain was down in delta waves. What is this?
I don't know, man. You wouldn't even need to sleep. You could literally just never sleep if you got to that point. You could be just like
living your life, talking to people, moving around in delta wave
That's
state.
Wild.
What?
Okay. All right. So now I'm going to refresh you on the stages of sleep. Our stages of sleep can also be measured by EEG, and they're closely connected to our brain waves. The states of sleep are known as REM and non-REM stages, 1, 2, 3, and 4. As we sleep, we oscillate between the stages every 90 minutes or so. Matthew Walker, PhD, illustrates this flip-flop between stages in his book, Why We Sleep. The deepest quality of sleep is found in the non-REM stages when the brainwave states move between theta and delta. The deepest state of yoga nidra is associated with brain activity that indicates the subject should be sleeping, but EEG readings suggest that the person isn't actually asleep and has a level of conscious awareness. People practicing yoga nidra tend to produce theta and delta brainwaves and still remain conscious. A 1999 study in Copenhagen in which yoga nidra practitioners' brain activity was monitored during a PET scan found something interesting. The measurements of the brain's activity indicated that the subjects were in a deeply relaxed state, similar to that of sleep, during the whole yoga nidra. The theta activity rose significantly, 11%, on all the 21 electrodes. The reduction of the alpha activity, 2%, was insignificant, showing that this meditative state is altogether different from that of the sleeping state and comprises conscious awareness. Furthermore, the state was constant and evenly distributed over the entire brain for the 45 minutes the relaxation lasted. So not only did they produce brainwaves, but the people being studied also traveled through the states of consciousness, which we're going to go into next. We're going to talk about the more spiritual states of consciousness. So like they can measure this. Like the whole point of this is that they've actually been able to prove this is what's happening when you get good at yoga nidra.
Yeah, it's not just that you're feeling relaxed, and you are, but you can actually look at your brain and see, oh no, we're literally moving into different brainwave states in this practice in the same way that people typically do during sleep.
Yeah.
But with more intentionality and while technically remaining conscious the whole time.
Okay. So when you put it all together, you get 4 levels of yoga nidra practice that move you through these brainwaves, like the stages of brainwaves and the stages of sleep. And she has a numbered list.
Okay. So we're going to go through them now that you are aware of what the different levels of brainwaves are. Number 1, during deep relaxation, alpha waves move into theta waves as the practice deepens. 2, during deeper practice, when the brain displays creativity or problem solving, theta waves verge on delta waves. Number 3, when the transition to the state of yoga nidra takes place, theta waves are followed by delta waves as the student drops into non-REM sleep but remains aware of their surroundings. 4, once the other 3 levels have been mastered, the student's mind can remain in the 2 states of deep sleep and conscious awareness simultaneously.
This really motivates me to want to become good at yoga nidra because you can't necessarily just get to that level of mastery after 2 practices. But if you did this consistently, you could be resting your body on that deep of a level all the time. Mm-hmm. In addition to sleeping every night. I'm like,
I know. Well, and I was thinking of you the whole time.
I know, of course.
Because I know that sometimes you do have trouble with normal sleeping. And I'm like, I wonder. So some of the practices that we'll get into later, she actually has practices for using yoga nidra to help you move into sleep states as well. So it's okay if sometimes yoga nidra turns into sleep. That's actually sometimes what it's used for. But the really cool part is when you can stay conscious the whole time.
Okay. So that's what's happening in your brain and in your physical body. But yoga nidra also is a spiritual practice, and it involves more intangible, esoteric concepts as well. It involves your subtle body, which is a term I'm familiar with, but some of you might not be. Your subtle body is like your energy body. Mm-hmm. It's the part of you can't see, but that is there. So often people will say, the chakras, like the 7 chakras, are part of your subtle body. Mm-hmm. It's, AKA your spiritual body or your energetic body.
So in yoga nidra, there are 5 layers of consciousness called koshas. And they move from the gross, which is just the most tangible,
physical outer layer,
which is kind of a funny way to describe it.
I mean,
but it really is
gross. So yeah,
kind of gross, like the gross physical human experiences, to the subtle, and they cover the light of the soul.
So she kind of suggests that you should think of the koshas as Russian nesting dolls. Mm-hmm. At the innermost doll is a brilliant, brightly burning light. However, as each doll is placed inside a larger doll, over time, the light in the innermost doll is forgotten. If you see the entire set of dolls put together from the outside, you see only one doll, the outer shell. It's easy to forget that you are so much more than just what you see, that you are the light, and that light is radiance, truth, and beauty. Some teachings say that part of your spiritual journey is to transcend the koshas, moving away from identification with the physical, that which is always decaying and dying, and toward tasting the eternal, which is your radiance. Mm-hmm. So there are 5 koshas, and we're going to give you a little snippet of each one of them.
Okay. The first one is what she calls Pranamaya kosha, which is also called the food body.
I love that it's called the food body, because I'm like, well, yeah, you just shove some food in that thing.
This is the most gross, the most physical.
She says, when we feel that the physical body is who and what we are identifying with the outermost shell of our subtle anatomy. Mm-hmm. Like you look in the mirror and you're like, that's me. That's like the kind of white girl basic way to interpret that is you're looking in the mirror and you're like, oh, I am what I eat. And you just think you are your shell.
Yep. Yeah. You over-identify with the physicalness
with the
of
physicality.
Yourself.
Yeah.
The next one is Pranamaya kosha, the energy body. I'm going to read you a little bit about that one. You and everything else are made of energy, and that energy is always changing. Your body is animated by an unseen force. There is a vital life force that is the source of life and is different than the breath. That vital life force is called prana. The breath is the primary vehicle, and food is its delivery system. Every form of physical exercise, asana or pranayama, in which you engage affects your prana. With the help of skilled teachers, you can learn how to create alchemy and sequence your practices for specific effects and outcomes. As you become more sensitive to prana, you become more aware of Pranamaya kosha, the energy body. So this one has a lot to do with the breath that you breathe in and out of your physical food body. I like calling it that.
Okay, and then the next nesting doll is Manomaya kosha, the mental body. She says self-inquiry practices can help you become aware of your thoughts and how they're shaping your life. Inquiring into the source of your beliefs allows you to discover how the past may be holding you prisoner. The more you move, breathe, meditate, and study yourself, the less you are a prisoner of your thoughts and more like an observer who knows the prison door is not really locked. If you can just turn your face in the other direction, you might see the doorway to freedom. Your daily practice becomes a way of reminding yourself that there is a door, and you begin to inch your way toward it. You become aware that you have a choice in which direction you're turning, toward the old repeating thoughts and patterns that are based on the past, or toward the discernment that is available in the present moment. When we begin to observe the functions of the mind as separate from who we really are, we have awareness of the Pranamaya Kosha, or the mental body. So realizing I am not my mind. I'm not my body. I am not my mind. I am not the thoughts that I am having. We are separate.
Okay. This next one, bear with me, you guys. Vijnanamaya Kosha. And it is the wisdom body. So I'm going to read you a little bit about this one. Who hasn't been on the yoga mat or meditation cushion, having a long run or walking in nature and had an epiphany? It is knowing that seems to descend out of nowhere. One of the translations of Vijnanamaya is to suddenly come into view. It may be such a profound, visceral feeling of knowing or understanding that you don't question it. You feel it in every cell of your body. This is a higher level of consciousness that resides in the intuitive or wisdom body. Truth has a frequency, and it takes time to cultivate the trust within yourself to eliminate the doubt and fear that comes with following your inner voice. When you recognize truth, it has a vibration. The more you practice, the more you attune yourself to that vibration. It is here that you may begin to sense that there is something constant and powerful that resides within you that is not subject to change. I mean,
the truth perfect. Has a vibration.
Isn't that so good? And you can attune yourself to it. So this is really your intuitive body. It makes sense that it's called your wisdom body because your intuitive self is just dropping epiphanies and you have to be on the vibration to receive them.
And then the last one is Anandamaya Kosha, the bliss body. Remember your first blissful savasana or meditation, the one that kept you coming back to yoga? It's possible that you tasted the sweetness of Anandamaya Kosha or bliss body. And in that bliss, you may have had a feeling that none of what you have identified with in your whole life is real. Your body, your thoughts, your beliefs, your intellect, they're not the real you. You feel for a split second that you are so much more expansive, radiant, and free. You are everything and everywhere. You are limitless and boundless. If you taste that even for a second, you will never be the same again. You will always know who and what you truly are. The steps toward Yoga Nidra help us to move toward the ethereal, beyond space and time, to touch our eternal radiance. Most schools of Yoga Nidra acknowledge a progression of steps that can move us through the koshas. Yoga Nidra is a technique is a journey from the gross to the subtle that leads to the state of consciousness that can only be accessed in the depths of spacious silence and grace. Although the journey through the koshas is presented as linear, it's common to move between states of consciousness or have varied experiences, such as noticing your own snoring, having flashes of visual images, being aware of energy moving and sounds emerging, and observing physical discomfort or emotions rising. Once you begin to explore them in practice, your understanding of the koshas will deepen. So it's not like this linear, like first this nesting doll, then that nesting doll. That's not really
None of this is super linear.
No,
that's not really the point.
We like to think about it that way because it helps us understand and makes us feel comfortable, but nothing ever actually is like that when you start doing it. It's messy.
But the bliss body sure sounds blissful. So I think it's worth trying to get down to that state.
That's the peeping through the wormhole part.
Oh, yeah.
I want to peep it like a peeping Tom through a wormhole. I want to do that.
That makes it sound like a dirty version of peeping.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that. The universe doesn't mind being peeped on.
No, it doesn't.
It's a voyeur, or whatever, whoever likes being
it's like the exhibitionist.
Yes. The universe is an exhibitionist and it wants you to peep on it. Okay.
So what I really love that she was talking about in this book is that, yes, each of those phases is really powerful in itself, but the liminal space between the phases is where the practice like really happened, like the transition that happen in between each of those. And it can just be moments or seconds.
Most of the transitions are moments. Like the moment between consciousness and falling asleep is so small.
But there's so much power in that transitional experience.
She tells a cool story about that.
Yeah. Okay. So let me tell you the story. In Why We Sleep, Matthew Walker tells the story of Thomas Edison, who was also a dedicated napper, which I love that about him.
Right? Like, okay.
Not a coincidence.
Just so you know, some of the most brilliant inventors were dedicated nappers.
Mm-hmm. According to legend, the inventor would nap in a chair holding 3 steel ball bearings and with a metal plate directly underneath him on the floor. The moment he drifted off, the balls would fall out of his hand and onto the plate, waking him up. He would immediately get up and write down all his creative ideas. He called this his genius gap. Albert Einstein napped with a metal spoon in his hand and a metal plate on the floor. Einstein's theory of relativity is said to have come to him during a dream. One can only wonder if Edison and Einstein had discovered the power of yogic sleep and the transition between states, using it as a portal to amplify creativity and genius. We all hold our own unique genius, and staying awake during the transitions between the states of consciousness may hold the key to realizing our superpowers. The neuroscientist and artist, I'm going to give Rachel, look at that name.
Oh, it's like Russian or Polish or something. Niketchynyaka.
Yep, that person.
Niketchynyaka.
Described the transition to me this way. Hypnagogia is the liminal space that exists between wakefulness and sleep, beginning at the onset when the mind is first impacted by sleepiness and concluding when the mind finally loses consciousness. This transitional phase lasts only a few minutes and includes lucid thought, lucid dreaming, and hallucinations. The experience of this space is far less immersive than a dream experienced in REM sleep, and it has often been a space artists rely on to amplify their creative expression. Our practice helps us to recognize these transitions and stay awake and aware during them, as opposed to blacking out. I just love that Edison and Einstein both
they were like,
had
I know
figured
about
this
that.
out.
Yeah.
And they had a system for capturing the insights that came in those liminal moments. I can't tell you
how many times I've had weird ass insights and ideas in that same state. I mean, I've told you, I've woken up saying almost a full phone number at one point to a very specific place. And I'm like, I still don't know what it means, but like, I've had so many weird experiences like that. And I'm like, this can help you expand your ability to do that and maybe make those spaces a little bit longer. That's cool.
I think I accidentally make these spaces longer by being someone who's hard to wake up in the morning, because I don't usually remember my dreams, but I usually set multiple alarms because I won't wake up on the first one. And they're only a few minutes apart. And I'll go back into this weird half dream state. And I always remember what's going on in my brain. And it's weird stuff. It's just like, it's like download type stuff in those random minutes. And then I usually forget it because I have to wake up.
That's part of what why after Yoga Nidra, she also always wants you to free write for like 3 to 5 minutes to capture the stuff that's coming up in that hypnagogic state.
Because you will forget it because you're in a different state of consciousness when it happens. So you have to capture it almost immediately or it's gone.
Okay. So here's what it looks like in action. Now we're kind of transitioning to but how do you do it? Mm-hmm. So there's some basic steps that most like schools of thought when it comes to Yoga Nidra will have or include. So we're going to kind of alternate reading the basic steps. The first is pre-practice. So gentle movements, mantras, or breathing practices to prepare the body to release tension and surrender. The mind is directed inward and an attitude of gratitude for the practice is cultivated. Take a moment to honor the practice and remember why you are practicing.
Relaxed and supported posture. Savasana. Side-lying poses, restorative poses, or any other posture in which the body can feel fully supported. Add as many props as you need and don't skimp. This relates to the third limb of yoga, asana, and cultivating a seat that is steady yet effortless.
Diaphragmatic breathing, one of the essential and often overlooked parts of practice. Oh, she has a grammar error there. Is establishing effortless breathing. We can begin by bringing attention to the navel area and moving up and down with each inhalation and exhalation. With practice, we can cultivate a diaphragmatic breath that is silent, effortless, smooth, deep, even, and continuous. This awareness of the breath can activate the body's rest and digest state. Pranayama, the fourth limb of yoga, is addressed here as the awareness of prana expands and the mind moves towards stability.
And we move into pratyahara. As we withdraw our awareness of the external stimuli by pulling our senses inward, the mind begins to still. This is the most important step in Yoga Nidra. It is the process of gradual dissolution. The awareness of sounds, sight, taste, touch, and smells are withdrawn, and our pull toward them is loosened. The teachings say that as a tortoise withdraws their limbs with ease, so one should withdraw the senses together with the mind. It is pratyahara that moves us towards spiritual liberation and the bridge that links the limbs of yoga.
Sankalpa, the acknowledgement of a resolve, intention, or affirmation. Though sankalpa or affirmations are often suggested, they're not always used or necessary. As we move into deeper experiences of the state of Yoga Nidra, sankalpa is released and we move into non-doing.
I love non-doing.
Me too.
Systematic relaxation of the body. Relaxation of parts of the body, awareness of breath, feeling that the body is breathing you, letting go of effort and doing. It is here that we become aware that there is an outside force that compels us to breathe, and we surrender to that involuntary action of breathing.
Visualization, the formation of and focus on a mental image of a specific thing, points of light, or a mantra. This is the sixth limb of yoga, dharana, aka concentration.
Resting awareness, settling awareness on one of the upper chakras, the heart, throat, third eye, or lower in the body at the womb. Here we have the opportunity to experience dhyana or meditation.
Surrender, allowing ourselves to dissolve into silence and spaciousness. Here we move from dhyana, possibly, toward samadhi, the final goal of yoga, and close to the fourth state, turiya. The latter can happen through grace. All of the previous steps help to prepare for this deepest level of surrender. Turiya is that like deep sort of, I think like that's when the bliss body thing is happening. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Welcoming ourselves back, moving back toward awareness of the gross plane. At this stage, we recognize where we are in space and time, deepen the breath, and remember that we have bodies. Our awareness begins to move from internal to external, hearing sounds and moving the body as we welcome ourselves back to the world.
Sankalpa smriti, remembering our sankalpa in the transition between the practice ending and waking.
And then finally, free writing or journaling.
This is second to last, not finally.
Oh, is there one more? Oh, yeah, there is. Okay. Processing the experience through writing to deepen our understanding and cultivate memory and retentive power. This is when the practice of self-study can be most powerful. It is a way for us to record our insights and translate the wisdom from our practices.
And the last is gratitude and self-love, offering gratitude for the practice and love for yourself. Mm-hmm. That's so that all of those steps are basically what you go through every time you do Yoga Nidra in some way or other. And all of the practices are a little bit different, but those are kind of like the beats you would normally hit.
And you don't have to remember all that because usually you go through some sort of a guided process.
Yeah.
That's going to walk you through each of those.
But that's what you're doing. Now, of course, are you always getting to like the bliss body and the like, peeping through the wormhole? No, the goal. But that's the intention, right? Okay. There's also a really again, this section is about how do we put this into action. There's this really beautiful story about dedicating your practice to someone that I thought was really good to share. So Octavia Raheem is a yoga teacher and the author of the book Gather. She actually was on Brene Brown's podcast, I believe.
Oh, okay. I missed that.
She finds the practice of inviting her ancestors to rest along with her in Yoga Nidra practice to be a powerful experience. So she says, when I first began to practice stillness-based yoga, I encountered a kind of restlessness that was shocking. I encountered resistance to pausing. I even met a sense of fear that something bad would happen if I allowed myself to lay down. It was as if I worried about being caught resting. I reflected on my conditioning. Girl, you better work twice as hard, be twice as fast, stay twice as long, and maybe, just maybe, you'll have half of a chance as others. That conditioning came from my mother and her mother and her mother and is rooted in very real experiences. That restlessness brought me into direct awareness that I didn't know how to rest and never had seen anyone in my family rest. I'd lay down in those early restorative yoga classes and toss and turn. I may even have broken a sweat from the discomfort of doing nothing. In a visceral way, I knew my restlessness was a symptom of being severely tired, not only from my life, but from the lives of the women who gave me life. Stillness awakened me to how much generational weariness and bone-deep ancestral fatigue I carried. It sounds poetic, yet history, family, and cultural stories tell us that Black women in America have been treated, as Zora Neale Hurston wrote, as the mule of the world, ridden, worked, and forced into labor, birthing, domestic, field, and beyond until we ran out of fuel, breath, or life. When I practice restorative yoga, yoga nidra, or meditation and go inside, I meet the most fatigued parts of myself and invite those parts to rest. I know how to work. Rest requires devotion and practice on my part. I also call in an ancestor who I know toiled through her whole life and could never acknowledge she was tired. I rest in honor of the women within me who were denied the opportunity to rest. I'm like, damn, if she didn't sell you on why you should rest and why it's not selfish, get out of town.
I know. And what a powerful thing to bring bring people into your practice who can help remind you.
Even dead people.
Yeah, well, yeah, why not?
Right?
We're not dealing with the gross body here. We're dealing with...
You're healing your own lineage, you know, when you do that.
Yeah. So you're going to notice there's a lot of introspection and a lot of self-inquiry that happens throughout the process of Yoga Nidra. And Tracee Stanley has actually included a lot of self-inquiry questions into this book. So there's prompts at the end of each of the practices that she shares throughout this. And I want to read you some of them that she shared after Octavia's story here, just as an example of what some of these questions that you might want to ask yourself before or after your practice might
These
look like.
questions are particularly relevant, which is why I picked them as our example, because I think a lot of people will relate to at least some part of Octavia's resistance to resting.
Yep. Okay, so here's 4 example questions. Who, if anyone, modeled how to rest and practice self-care and self-love for you? What message did you receive about the worth of rest and your ability to have it as an integral part of your life? What habits, thoughts, or resistance prevent you from fully dropping in to the practice? If part of your legacy were to change the relationship to rest and self-care for your family lineage, how would you begin? Oh, I love that last question.
Yeah.
What if you could change this and break the pattern of what you learned about rest? And how would you start to have a different relationship? Build a new lineage.
Okay. So since we're on the subject of resistance, let's talk about where we get tripped up, because I'm sure a lot of you are having the same feelings that I have had and people that she talks about in this book have had, which is like, this sounds awesome, but how am I going to make time for this? Like, just that is so much resistance, right? So I really appreciated this point, and I want to share this thought that she has. I suggested to him, so this is someone that she encountered resistance with at a retreat, and he was like, I'm a single dad. I'm a stay-at-home dad. I don't have time for this.
I stayed home to do 5 children.
To 5 children. Yeah. I suggested to him in the group that we reframe the idea of what yoga practice looks like. More specifically, who a dedicated yoga practitioner is. Usually when we think of dedicated yoga practitioners, we visualize people who have many hours a day to meditate, study, and practice. We see them as very disciplined. They always seem to be reading scriptures, discovering new teachers, trying new modalities, and going to workshops or on spiritual pilgrimages. This kind of time is a luxury and a privilege, and not the case for most of us. We consider ourselves lucky if we can eke out time for a class once or twice a week. Somehow, we've gotten the idea that spiritual fruits are only delivered to those who have a lot of time, resources, and discipline to dedicate to practice. We decided that if we can't do a full hour of practice, it's not even worth bothering. But who said that a practice needed to be an hour or 90 minutes to be valid? That comes from the commercialization of yoga as a wellness product to be sold, and not as a lifelong practice that can lead to spiritual freedom. It's true that it can be a little daunting when you read in texts such as the Yoga Sutras that the way to practice yoga is with consistency for a long period of time with no interruption. But no interruption, for most of us, that's a non-starter. We feel like we're set up to fail. It's easy to give up or not even begin. Let's drop the idea that a practice needs to be an hour just because that's what yoga studios have been selling us for years. What if we stopped compartmentalizing and saw the whole of our lives as a spiritual practice? What if we explored the many opportunities during the day that can connect us to a deeper part of ourselves? What if that became our practice?
I love that she's so realistic about this, because most people don't have 90 minutes every day, or even multiple times a week.
Like try to peep into the void.
Right. Exactly.
You know?
Exactly. So what she's saying is, if all you have is 5 minutes, 3 minutes, 2 minutes, that's okay. You're really just taking deep breaths, and maybe you're repeating a mantra while you're like bathing your baby or going for a walk or doing the dishes or commuting. And that's fine. That's a way of practicing this.
Yeah. You can just find little spaces of life where you can release resistance and drop into a peaceful state. And that builds momentum. She actually says it starts to change your relationship with time itself. Mm-hmm. Like the more, even a few minutes at a time, you can drop into that, you start to feel sort of the expansiveness and the time and that sort of timelessness that happens when you get into that sort of deep relaxation bliss state. And then that changes, time expands. Mm-hmm. Like it I think it was Einstein to harken back. It was like, time is relative, right?
Yep.
So yeah, it changes your relationship to how you even conceive of time when you can do it even a little bit. And then you can get more time and space.
Yeah, just little pieces throughout the day. And Tracee has a whole chapter about this called The Householder's Flow. I'm going to tell you, this was my favorite chapter of the book because it was the most accessible. It was like, if you're busy, you can still do this, essentially. And she gives 15 steps for getting into practices that you can do just as you're going about your life, just in those little moments in between life events. And I want to read you a few of them as examples. One of them is, let go of the idea that your practice needs to be 15, 30, or 90 minutes long to be meaningful or valid. Another one is, instead of one long practice, try 2 to 3 minute mini practice portals that you can weave throughout your day. You can set the timer on your phone to remind you when to practice. Find time to lay down and practice the body awareness exercise on page 64 or Pratyahara practice on page 67 for 3 minutes. When you have a few minutes of space to practice, notice how resistance to resting or practicing may show up. Be aware of what you feel called to do instead. Is it nurturing, supportive, or healing? Is your default mode moving you toward healing or toward distraction and staying stuck? Another one. Use your least favorite chore as a portal to practice. Chant, sing, or follow your breath while washing dishes, doing your taxes, doing laundry, or mopping the floor. For me, it would be vacuuming. I hate vacuuming. Use your resistance as a way to turn the mundane into the sacred. You will find suggestions for mantras in the resources, but any song or affirmation that is offered with devotion will work. Another one. Leave a small space in your home, a chair, your yoga mat, a corner of the room, a closet, or even your car, set up and ready for your practice. Begin to see every seat as a potential meditation seat or yoga nidra seat. You'll learn how to set yourself up for the ultimate surrender in the next chapter. And there's one more that I want to share. Reframe your deep relaxations and yoga nidra practices as surrenders. Remind yourself it's time to surrender instead of it's time to practice. Let go of the energy of doing. Yoga nidra is the practice of non-doing, and grace descends when you let go. I love that mantra. Instead of it's time to practice, which feels like very action oriented. No, time to surrender. Mm-hmm. Time to not do anything.
One very universal part of every yoga nidra practice is setting up your nidra nest. So this is what Una Dinsmore Tooley, who introduced Tracee to the idea of the nest, has to say about what it is. I observed that a truly well-supported and comfortable experience of yoga nidra can be a receiving of nurture and nourishment, an encounter with the healing power of the deep feminine. Usually, each nidra nest includes a couple of yoga mats or a padded mat, a couple of pillows or cushions, several bolsters for the knees, mini bolsters for the neck and arms, and a number of warm, fluffy blankets. Eye pillows are also on offer, and sometimes weighted blankets or sandbags to soothe and calm the nervous system. Then Tracee said, I immediately began to reframe how I was setting up my practices and what suggestions I offered my students for setup. I supported students in creating the most luxurious throne for resting. Here's what I encountered: resistance. Resistance to deeply relaxing. Most students felt their existing setup was good enough. But during teacher training, when co-teacher Chanti Tacoronte Perez and I asked the same students to set up another student, they spared no indulgence in the setup. They talked with the student to make sure they were beyond comfortable, warm enough, and felt supported. Sometimes it's easier to give someone else that extra dose of love that we're not willing to give ourselves. Imagine how animals in nature will forage for anything and everything to create a nest of comfort and protection for their young. This is the kind of care and devotion you can have for your own setup. This is also a good time to review those notes from your body awareness exercise, which you should have done earlier in this book. I didn't think I did that. To remind yourself of where you need extra support. So yeah, if you were setting it up for someone else, you wouldn't skimp on its comfy factor. But if it's you, you're like, this little blanket's fine.
Mm-hmm. I remember this in the Yoga Nidra class that I took a few years ago.
That I wasn't present.
That you weren't. No, I remember you weren't there. And at first there was yoga mats laid out for everyone. And I was like, oh, that's fine. I can just lay on a yoga mat for a little while. And the teacher was really encouraging everyone to add all these props in. And so, man, I made a beautiful nest. It was so comfortable, but she really had to encourage everyone, me included. I was like, oh, I'm just laying here. I just put a blanket over me or whatever. That's fine.
More.
And she's like, put a pillow under your knees, put a pillow under your head, put a pillow under your low back.
It's hard to let go if you're not super supported.
And by the end, man, you were so comfortable. You're like, I'll chill here all day.
Yeah.
So yeah, but there is one important caveat that she gives in this book.
Oh, I hated this caveat.
I know. But there's a good reason for it. And don't make your bed your nest. And I'm going to explain why.
Don't do Yoga Nidra in bed.
No. To further separate your sleep flow from your Yoga Nidra practice, avoid using your bed as a place to practice Yoga Nidra as a spiritual or transformational practice. The bed is associated with sleep, or perhaps the frustration of not being able to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Either way, there is an energy in your bed that has accumulated over time. And since you usually have no way of knowing what that energy is, try practicing Yoga Nidra in a separate space with your Yoga Nidra nest setup. You wouldn't take your yoga mat into bed and sleep on it, so don't create a nest in the same bed that you sleep in at night if at all possible. If it's unavoidable, try switching out the blankets and pillows that you use during Nidra so they are not the same ones you use at night. Over time, the shawl, eye pillows, and items in your nest will carry the energy of Nidra Shakti, which will empower your spiritual practice of Yoga Nidra and the ability to stay awake and aware during the practice. It makes sense.
It does.
And just like you're not really supposed to meditate in bed because the energy of sleep is just sitting there waiting for you. Or again, the frustration of sleep. So it's just like, some stuff.
I did do the first one in my bed because I didn't read that part yet. And then I did the rest of them on the couch.
Now, I think she would say, because there are some of the practices she shares how to do them to help yourself fall asleep. So, of course, that's the exception. If you're actually trying, because some people who struggle with sleep or have some insomnia, they might use Yoga Nidra to lull their bodies
that's not really
into
the
a sleep
highest
state.
Form of Yoga Nidra.
That's not really this kind of more spiritual point of Yoga Nidra, but it does help. So you can do it in bed in that case.
Okay. So like we mentioned, in this book, she outlines 6 different practices, slightly different benefits, intentions, but we kind of reviewed this earlier, but there are some common through lines. So she suggests if you can start out by preparing your body for deep relaxation with things like a little self-massage, maybe a few yoga poses, and a few minutes of deep breathing. That's how she likes you to start out.
Mm-hmm. And each of the practices also comes with a sankalpa, which, if you'll remember, is the guiding essence or intention of the practice. The sankalpa for the first practice, which is about grounding and stability, is I honor and acknowledge my body as a sacred vessel that houses my inner light. I invite deep rest into every cell of my being. I trust that I deserve to be supported, nurtured, and helped unconditionally. I know the earth can hold me.
I just like that a lot.
Mm-hmm. I think the first one was maybe my favorite, but that's because I love grounding. I need grounding.
I've done all of them except the 6th one, which is called Into the Void, and I really want to do it, but it's 50 minutes and I just didn't have time before we recorded this to do it. But I've done it once a day up into this recording for like, I don't know, 5 days or something like that. There's also a mantra sometimes, not always, depending on the practice. It's usually in Sanskrit, like a couple of words in Sanskrit that you repeat when she kind of prompts you to. So like I said, I did 5 out of the 6 practices so far. And one of them I was very distracted because I was like high anxiety. And so I that's the one that you did that you liked. And I don't remember it that well because I was like in my beta state and I couldn't, it was hard for me to get out of beta. But I think my favorite was, you haven't done this one yet, the moon nectar one. It was like, you were imagining some like luminescent moon nectar and you're like putting it into on every like little part of your body. And so there's often like, here's what's slightly different about it than meditation. There's no like music in the background. Often when there's like a guided meditation, there's like some cool kind of chill music in the background. There's no music. It's just silence. She'll often take really long beats and pauses between like prompts. So when I did the grounding one, I had my volume up too loud in my headphones and I was like drifting away. And then she would say something and I'd be like, oh, and she startled me like very multiple jarring. Times. Yes. There's also a lot of counting backwards. Yeah. And like body scan type of stuff. From like 20, like random number. Well, I'm sure it's not random, but 27 backward all the way 18 down. 18 backward in another one. There's some like, there's definitely a lot of like body scan stuff that you kind of go back and forth across your body. There was one with a body scan with like, like you imagine like a star in each of these. This is the one where I wasn't paying very close attention. Oh, this was another one that I did. The grounding one, I picked that one particularly because I know that I need grounding. It was for people who feel overwhelmed a lot. And I was like, oh yeah, that one. But there was a different one. I think it was the third one that was imagining like probably similar to the moon and the moon nectar or whatever, however she described that. Is that the one where you're like, imagine like you're like your attention's going to like the trees outside and then it's going even further and then it's going to like the moon and then it's going to the furthest reaches of the galaxy? Because that one I thought was cool. Yeah, I think it might've been. But then at some point you like zoom out and you just see your body as this like constellation of all these little stars that you've placed. I don't know. It was really cool. Did you do the one where you enter into a chamber in your heart? And you hang out there. I read that one. Altar there. I read that one, but I did that one, which was very cool. Her version of it, the practice. Yeah, that was very neat. How do you feel afterward? Because I just feel like I just took the best nap ever. I don't know that I feel like I took a nap, but I feel very relaxed, and I think the days I did it, I felt more energized later in the day. But it didn't. But I still slept. Like, it wasn't like I was like, oh, I'm so energized I can't sleep or something. Yeah. Like, I mean, I think you'd have to do it for longer than I've been doing it to really get like I don't know, like a snowballing benefit from it. But I don't know. There's something about it that to me feels different than meditation, even though it's basically meditation. It is basically meditation, but it feels, I like it better because you're allowed to do it laying down. You're allowed to have pillows. You're allowed to like, you don't have to pay attention. That's it. Meditation feels like you have to pay attention to be actively like moving your thoughts away like, and focusing. This is so much more gentle and like no one's forcing you to pay attention. Though my mind does wander and then it's like, oh, never mind. Okay, come back to counting backward. I just feel like it's nicer than meditation. I don't know how to explain it. Yeah, I feel it's kinder. It's more chill. It is. It's more chill in lots of ways. And I like it better for that reason. Yeah. Because meditation feels almost like, for me, and I know that this is not everyone's experience, meditation feels a little bit more like you're stretching your brain or something. And I don't want to stretch my brain sometimes. Sometimes I just want to release and surrender. And that's what Yoga Nidra is really about. Yeah. Is that surrender state, about non-doing. Yeah. Right. So it's very similar, but there's like, in essence, there's a different sort of intention and purpose to it that I appreciate more than just regular meditation. It's like meditation plus sleep. Even better. Yeah. I mean, not really sleeping, but yogic sleep. Trying to sleep, like trying to mimic what's happening during sleep. so in the conclusion, she talks about, well, how will you know when you've attained like the point of Yoga Nidra, which is spiritual freedom? Like, have I gotten there yet? Am I spiritually free yet? She quotes another practitioner who says, it's achieved not by knowing the truth, but awakening to it as a lived experience. Do the practice until it becomes a lived experience, and then you will know. That's kind of that's like how coaching works too.
I know.
Like, it's not something you intellectually know. It's something that you have to integrate into your way of living. And then when you have done that, you are, you have essentially changed and awoken to a different version of yourself.
But you do have to live it. And that's why she says a consistent practice performed over a long period of time and with devotion will change you. And again, you can't just read the book and think about it. You have to practice it. But again, remember that householder's flow that you talked about earlier. It doesn't have to be 90-minute practices, just little moments of dedicated practice.
The neuroscientist Joe Dispenza, she quotes him in the conclusion. She says, you're priming your brain to install the neurological hardware to actually think, act, and feel like the person you want to be in your future. If you keep firing and wiring those networks in your brain, the hardware eventually becomes the software program, and making choices that are in alignment with your future becomes more automatic. When you do it enough times, as we walk as our future self, as we get our body involved each day in the process, this behavior becomes the habit of the new self. It's just like consistency and repetition reprogram the brain. We know this, but that's what Yoga Nidra can help you do when you're doing it consistently. Help you actually change how you're showing up. I feel like the guy who wrote, Bessel van der Kolk, who wrote The Body Keeps the Score, probably loves Yoga Nidra as like a way of reprogramming the body and brain, you know?
Yeah, and calming the nervous system, especially for people who have had some trauma or have an over anxious or overactivated system. This would be really, really good.
There's one last thought that I want us to share, which I really loved. She says a consistent practice will go against the grain of our habits and preferences and create friction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But she also says we have the capacity to gain more clarity and self-knowledge if we stay awake to the lessons and don't run from the heat or friction produced in the discomfort. This is the alchemy of spiritual transformation.
That's what we do. Like, I love that, because I was like, that's what coaching is too. We create friction and we don't run from it. It produces heat. And in that heat, you are transformed. Like, the alchemical change happens. Mm-hmm. So that is what's happened when you're sticking with something that is uncomfortable but good for you. You are changing yourself on a cellular level.
I just so appreciate her being honest about the fact that you are going to feel resistant to this. Even if you want it, there's going to be times when you're like, this would be the perfect time for me to practice for the next 5 minutes or the next 20 minutes. And you're going to feel resistant, and that's okay. How validating to know that, like, you're not doing it wrong. You're just a human, and this is uncomfortable, but if you it's supposed to be. And if you can stick with it for any length of time, it gets more and more baked into your hardwiring, and it's not going to feel this uncomfortable indefinitely.
So I hope that if nothing else, we have encouraged you to check out Tracee Stanley. And if you don't even want to read the book, I'm like, please support her and buy her book. But also you could follow her. It's Tracee, Tracee, Stanley, spelled like you think it is. And I actually, a year ago, she released a course through a platform called on Commune, which is a platform of like courses for like personal development and yoga and that type of stuff. And it was in the middle of like one of the craziest months, like June of last year. So like I did not have time to do it, but I bought her whole like Yoga Nidra course because I intended to do it and then I never did. And then I bought this book, and now I'm like, I'm going back and doing her course now.
Yes.
But follow her and like try out some of the practices.
She's such an accessible teacher. She understands that everyone's approaching this from a very different set of circumstances, and they have different bandwidth that they can give to this, and they're going to have resistance. And I feel like there's a lot of, whether it's yoga teachers or just like wellness people in general, who make it seem like you have to do it this way or else you're not really going to get the value. And she's just going to support you wherever you are at. And she recognizes like you can benefit from this with whatever you can give to it. So
also, I love that about her. That just looking at her photo, I'm like, that woman has radiantly rested. Like
it's true.
She really emanates like, I am radiant and I'm alive and I'm taking care of myself energy.
Yeah, it's true. You can see it in her skin, in her whole essence.
Yeah.
She lives it.
Mm-hmm. So I hope this is cool. Introducing you to stuff. A lot of you might not have even known this was a thing. Yoga Nidra might have been something you didn't even know existed. So
or you might have heard of it and been like, is that just some other type of yoga class? It's really quite different.
I'm like, what is the point of just laying on a mat and not actually working out? Well, I hope that this whole episode proved to you a lot. There's a whole lot to it.
A whole lot.
There's a big point to it. Okay. This is a longin'.
Yeah. There's a lot to get into. But we hope you'll try one of the practices.
A lot of talking for something that's in essence about non-doing. But it's hard non-doing. It creates friction, but it's good for you.
It's like almost hard to explain non-doing to all of us who are just doing all the time. But I would love for you to try one and then come leave a comment on this episode to tell us what your experience was.
Yeah.
Especially if it's a new experience to you. I'd love to hear that.
I liked it a lot and I intend to keep playing around with it because I want to heal my body's ability to deeply rest. Committed to that. Okay. So we talked, just a little transition as we conclude, we wrap up here. We talked last Friday about the fact that one-on-one coaching enrollment is coming back. We're opening it up again in 2 weeks. We are going to be making some changes this time and then later in the year to how we do one-on-one coaching. But we decided we're going to have a whole announcement episode,
a bonus got some other things to share with you as well.
Yeah, we have some things that have just been going on behind the scenes that we're like, okay, I think we can talk about this now that we've been alluding to.
I feel like we've been teasing and hinting at things for a little while. We're just going to come out with it.
So come back on Tuesday because we're actually going to release a little bonus episode where we talk about new things happening and the change we're making to one-on-one coaching. Then.
Okay. So we will see you on Tuesday.
Bye.
Bye.